The Five Orange Pits of Westchester County, New York, is the oldest of the Baker Street Irregulars' silent societies. It is with that information that we dig into today's story, called Baker Street from Guam by Ellery Husted. And while serving in the South Pacific during World War II, the author of this little piece discovered that to the US government, neither Sherlock Holmes nor national security are particularly amusing subjects. Baker Street from Guam. It happened in the Pacific. After waiting around Ford Island 3 weeks for my orders, I was yanked out of my bed by the orders of the OD's messenger the night they came. The orders read, Report SyncPack, Advanced Intelligent Headquarters Guam, passage via air transport, proceed without delay. SyncPack was Admiral Nimitz, Commander-in-Chief Pacific. An hour's paperwork, 15 minutes packing, and I made it by jeep a minute before the plane took off. There was a 2-day hop ahead, and I'd forgotten to pack a book. On my way through the hangar, I saw on a chair a paperback volume with no visible owner. The cover said, 6 Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. I stole it without hesitation and without shame. Our plane was an old DC lined with bucket seats and filled with mailbags and vapours of DDT. The people riding on it were mostly army, and they were bored and uncommunicative. On the first leg to Johnson's Island, I read my borrowed volume twice. On the first reading, the tales were hauntingly familiar. On the second, there were no surprises. I wondered what I could do to make my cheerless, viewless transit of the Pacific less depressing. I pictured Sherlock Holmes and Watson seated comfortably and conversationally before their fire at 221B Baker Street, and wondered, in my ex-architect's way, what their rooms had looked like. Suddenly, a thought burned like a sunbeam through the cloud of my ennui. I retrieved the 6 adventures from where I had dropped them on the deck and prepared for another reading with reawakened eyes. This reading turned out better than I dared hope. Scattered through each of the 6 adventures were disconnected but explicit references to physical arrangements of the famed rooms. As I read through the pages quickly, the descriptions seemed to form an intelligible pattern. I had a pencil with me and plenty of paper, so I started my 4th reading with pencil poised. All references to Baker Street I copied whole, like these. We met the next day, as he had arranged, and inspected the rooms at 221B Baker Street. They consisted of a couple of comfortable bedrooms and a single large airy sitting room, cheerfully furnished and illuminated by 2 broad windows. He would lie upon the sofa in the sitting room. As we sat on each side of the fire, we heard a loud knock, a deep voice below, and heavy steps ascending the stair. A bath at Baker Street and a complete change freshened me up wonderfully. When I came down to our rooms, I found the breakfast laid and Holmes pouring out coffee. By the time the plane reached Johnson's Island and dipped into a landing on the blazing coral, the tedious business of transcription was almost over. During the rest of the trip to Kwajalein and Guam, the work of sorting and assembling architectural references made the long hours pass easily. To my surprise, each reference, as I found it, fitted like a shaped piece into the picture puzzle of 221B. It was possible from the text to imagine the plans and elevations, the arrangement of the rooms, the position of doors and windows, and even the number of risers on the stairs. I know there are 17 steps because I have both seen and observed. The disposition of furniture in Holmes and Watson's rooms was carefully described, not only the major pieces, but the minor articles as well. I picked up a magazine from the table. There was a small portmanteau in the sitting room. Sherlock Holmes took his bottle from the corner of the mantelpiece and his hypodermic syringe from its neat morocco case. He took up his violin from the corner. When all these references had been written down, grouped and analysed, I decided to amuse myself by reconstructing the plans and elevations. No line was drawn without confirmation from the text. Slowly, and with developing clarity, the outlines of 221B began to emerge. When the work of literary restoration was complete, the written evidence had grown into a bulky package. My first concern on landing at Guam was how to rid myself of these superfluous papers. I was about to consign them to the hangar's head when I thought of my friend Dick Clark of the 5 Orange Pips. It might amuse him to receive this bit of literary archaeology out of the blue of the Pacific. I put the papers in an envelope addressed to Clark, and upon my arrival at Nimitz's headquarters on Sinkac Hill, gave them to a yeoman to send by airmail, warning him to put on plenty of stamps. Though I couldn't remember much about the 5 Orange Pips, I had a vague picture of a group of cheerful and scholarly eccentrics, incurably addicted to the needle of Sherlock Holmes. Members were said to be solely selected on the basis of Holmesian erudition. At the annual dinners, the members exchanged learned papers illuminating obscurities in Watson's narrative and explaining ambiguities in the text. Solemn and scholarly research was devoted to unravelling unsolved cases referred to by Watson. A delegation of members had once journeyed to London to call on the British Brethren, the Sherlock Holmes Society of London, and to visit the site where the house was ingeniously argued to have stood. Although I was not myself, except by the accident of war, a student of Sherlock Holmes, I hoped that my reconstruction of the famous lodgings might be a contribution to the archives of the Orange Pips. At any rate, the inconvenient burden of my scholarship was now disposed of and shortly forgotten in the more serious business of war. Some months later, new duties took me from Guam. When I returned, the war was almost over. The day I got my orders home, I was cheerfully destroying official papers when a yeoman handed me a large and vaguely familiar envelope covered with the ink of rubber stamps. I looked at it casually and saw it was my letter to Clark, come back to roost after all these months. I assumed that it had been sent off with too few stamps, but my absorption with the task of getting home made the omission a matter of no importance. I had wangled a ride back to Pearl Harbor for the following night on Admiral Nimitz's private plane. Weight was crucial, and I knew there were better things to carry than paper. Without looking at the envelope again, I chucked it into the burn basket with the rest of the junk. Next morning, I climbed aboard the Admiral's transport for the first half of the long journey home. The plane was a C-54 with a forward-facing single seat. A young blonde ensign in the seat ahead of me turned around when we were airborne and said, "Your name's Husted?" I nodded. The ensign added with a grin, "And how's Dr. Watson doing?" I considered the question for a minute and realised the ensign must have been the Sinpac censor. I said, I suppose you censored that Baker Street letter? Yeah, the ensign replied. And did it give us trouble? They put their best brains on Guam on it, and nobody could make anything of it. It was obviously in code, but we couldn't break it, so we sent it back to Pearl. They spent some time on it and sent it on to Washington, but it was a no-go. It came back to us, and we held on to it till the war was over. I laughed at the absurdity of the incident and said, "Hell, you knew all about me. Why didn't you ask me about it?" The ensign smiled. "Yeah, we knew all about you, but it wasn't that easy. We checked your handwriting with the letter, and it didn't agree. Too jerky. Apparently, the eccentricities of airborne calligraphy had been overlooked. And you'll agree that all that damn stuff about 221B Baker Street sounded damn queer. On any basis, the letter didn't make sense." I thought of the wavy handwriting, of the drawings made shaky in unprofessionalism by the undulations of air travel, of my mysterious disconnected passages lifted from the text, and especially of my enigmatic letter to Clark. "Dear Dick, excuse this unexpected and almost incomprehensible gibberish I'm about to send you. Tell your group of particular pips that 221B did exist, and it's been reconstructed by one who is not one of you, but believes in you. I wish Holmes were here with me to solve the riddle of the Empire. God bless you, and in the name of Holmes and Baker Street, keep up the good fight. Yours, Husted." I could not agree that Synpax's alerted censors had some cause for their suspicions. I was ruminating pleasantly over the extent of the trouble I'd probably caused when the blonde head before me revolved again to say, "And worst of all, my friend, Baker Street was the code name for OSS headquarters, London." When I told the tale to Clark back home, Clark was not amused. He shook his head sadly. He said, "That envelope was a natural for the archives, and like an idiot, you burnt it with your Navy papers. You ought to have been court-martialed." The end. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, please like, subscribe, and until the next episode, bye-bye.